Hey, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Nonprofit Show. I'm really excited, a little intimidated to be welcoming back Michael Nouguier, partner of Cybersecurity Services, over with our friends at Richey May. Welcome back, my friend. It's been a minute.
It has been. I'm so excited to be back, though. I love talking alongside you. So
Well, Michael, I was thinking about this as we were getting ready to welcome you back to another episode of the Nonprofit Show. We had you on very early when we started the Nonprofit Show. I mean, we've been doing this now for 6 years, more than 1,300 episodes. And I was thinking, did we even talk about AI? Or if we did, was it just like way in fantasy land?
not at all. AI as a concept was still one of those things that was like, yeah, that's way out there, right? It's in the movies, and
Yeah.
then shortly thereafter, it hit the road and just took off. So
Yeah. Well, this is going to be an interesting conversation because everybody needs to be thinking about cybersecurity now more than ever. And I think it's a daunting topic and then it's an expensive topic. I think you're going to help us understand that it's really expensive if you don't do anything about it.
absolutely,
So we're going to be really diving into this, and it's going to be a great conversation, and one I know you'll have a lot of patience with us because for some of us, this is somewhat of a new concept. Hey, it's not a new concept. Are our amazing partners? They include Bloomerang American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Interim Executives Academy, Your Part-Time Controller, and Fundraisers Friday. Julia C. Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy, and super excited to welcome back Michael Nouguier, partner, Cybersecurity Services at Richey May. Okay, talk to us before we get, to this bigger topic about Richey May for some of our viewers and listeners that might not know about Richey May. Where are you located and what the heck do you do?
yeah, we're a national tax audit and advisory and accounting firm, right? And specialize in a lot of different areas, including cybersecurity, which is really my forte. And based and headquartered in Denver, but offices all over the U.S. and there to provide advice and consulting towards whatever industry focuses you're looking to have. From a cybersecurity perspective, that's really our forte. And as this episode states, right, really driving towards how to be secure on a budget.
It's such an interesting thing that you are coming to us from an umbrella organization that deals with accounting and fintech, and that this is such a big topic that, and Richey May is not alone. We're seeing more and more traditional accounting firms get into this consulting space and really drawing the link between being financially responsible and having this cyber piece ingrained. I find it fascinating.
Yeah, I mean the two go hand in hand, right? Cybersecurity
Oh,
exists because it can be more expensive if it doesn't exist, right?
yeah, yeah, and I think it's fascinating that it's the financial sector, and correct me if I'm wrong. I think the financial sectors, they're the ones driving this. It seems to me, Michael, that the CPAs and the traditional finance companies are the ones that have been saying, they've been kind of like, you know, the clarion call. Hey, everybody, wake up. We need to be thinking about this. And I think it's just fascinating.
Yeah. The AICPA is the governing association over all of tax and audit and accounting, and cybersecurity has just become more and more of a thought process through this, right? Of right, you've been doing your financial statement audits, your taxes, whatever you need to do from a regulatory perspective, and if cybersecurity is not considered as a part of that, right? Our goal is to make sure our clients thrive, and if we are getting hit by ransomware or losing donor trust or having or like garnering a bad reputation through getting breached, right, that impacts our client success, and we're here for the success of our clients.
Yeah, it's really an interesting thing to be looking at our financial partners and that leadership in this new way, it makes abundant sense, right? I mean, it's a logical thing, but I think a lot of nonprofits don't think about that the people that they're already working with, chances are this is some place where they can go to get information, the latest and greatest, um, and that it might be something you can deal with within your budget. And that's one of the things that we're going to talk about today. So, frame this up a little bit about when we're thinking about the budgetary constraints and trying to register or reconcile that with risk. What does that look like to you?
Yeah, I mean, some people would say that there's a direct correlation with the amount of money you spend and the level of risk that you are reducing with that. And I think it really comes down to, um, yes, there is some correlation there, but it also, you have to take a look internally to understand realistically what we already have in place. A lot of organizations don't know that they already own a lot of these tools, whether you're on Google or you're leveraging Microsoft for email. There are security tools that exist that just aren't being leveraged. And you can go out and increase your budgetary spend on other tools, but you should probably take that intrinsic look and say, what do we have and what can we leverage from what we're already paying for or getting as a nonprofit through our existing licensing structure. And so it all comes down to that risk aspect as well, is what risks do we have as a nonprofit? What secondary industry are we in? We are nonprofits, but we're serving the healthcare community, or we're serving the education space, and where are our risks aligned there, and what tool sets do we need to expand in those areas to protect our the privacy of our constituents, of our donors, of those that we're serving.
Yeah, I love that you put that forward because I think a lot of times we start this conversation about donor data, but absolutely our constituency, the stakeholders that we have, everything is so, man, orchestrated through a platform. That's one of the questions I wanted to ask you that just kind of popped into my head when you mentioned a lot of these licenses that we're using already have security measures built in. Um, do you think that the nonprofit sector is doing a good enough job of understanding what our providers are using and navigating this? So, from you know the donor metrics software that we might own, the volunteer management systems that we might have purchased, not just the accounting software platforms, but all of these other things. I'm thinking about, this flurry of grant management tool companies. I mean, there's just so much out there that we're investing in terms of platforms.
Yeah, I think uh, the security aspects that exist in those tools, right? What the trend in the industry has been to offload the security aspects to the core technologies that you have, and I'll bring this around to make more sense, right? Like, security is heavily focused on identity or access of data, which is what we're tasked to protect in this, whether it's credit cards or private information, personally identifiable information. And so all of those platforms that we're leveraging to drive our success as a nonprofit tend to tie back into some core concepts of identity and access, which are typically through like a Google or a Microsoft. There are other third parties there. And so, yes, those integrations exist. And so tying those in together, one, it simplifies the security stack from that perspective, because you're not managing multiple tools, right? There is a technical component. So making sure that you have a technical enough person to implement these and implement them correctly. And then making sure that they're being leveraged across the board, because then you only have to, let's take multi-factor authentication. People love to hate multi-factor authentication. Oh, I can't get into my email because I need a 6-digit code. Or yes, I run security for large organizations and I still hate it. I hate having to do it because it takes time. It's not convenient. However, that's one of the number one things you can do to protect data is just asking a secondary question like, hey, thanks for entering your password. but let's prove that you're yourself. Trust but verify. And if you're tying that into one single system like a Microsoft or a Google, that have those aspects and use that single identity across your other platforms, you're able to save not just money on having to buy another tool set to do this, but also time and effort in managing all of that sprawl, is what I'll call it, across multiple systems, right? If it can all just be in one centralized area.
Wow, I love that you use the word sprawl, because that kind of brings it home for me. When you're talking about risk and you're talking about the cost of engaging in these, just in technology. I mean, I think there's everybody in the nonprofit sector is talking about how woefully behind this concept we are as a sector. We've been so slow to move forward and really become effective when it comes to technology.
Yep.
And so it's really a great starting point for us to kind of talk to you about this so that we can understand where we should even begin. One of the things that you point out is that when we're talking about budget, I mean, free sounds good, right? And one thing you already highlighted, which I hadn't really thought of it this way, was that we should be looking at these platforms that we're using to find out what things might actually exist and might be there that we're just not implementing
Yep.
or exploiting to our advantage. Talk to us about what this might look like.
Yeah, it's what's almost as good as free is something that you've already been paying for and didn't know that you could leverage, right? And so, in these situations, right, like we've talked about, like there are 100 different security tools that you're probably already playing, invested in inside of your organization from an integrations perspective. But there are also just free services that you can leverage for understanding where your weaknesses lie, right? From vulnerability scanning on your external network to free policy templates. Richey May Cyber provides, free policy templates and external vulnerability scanning in the nonprofit sector. The Center for CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, actually does provide free services for all organizations so that you can understand where your risks lie from security assessment, things along those lines as well. And we often recommend, hey, if you want a place to start, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency with the United States of America is a great place to start. Handful of other free services out there, from monitoring and logging, if there is some sort of compliance driver for like PCI, if you're accepting credit cards for donor funds, right there. There are some tool sets out there. It's called Wazoo, Wazuh. Some people pronounce it Wazza. It's completely free. It's completely free. However, the costs are typically associated with needing the technical expertise to implement something like that in the organization. But lowering that tech debt by integrating services and technologies that are low to no cost help drive a greater security posture across the board.
We were talking in the green room that a lot of times nonprofits are hesitant, or they don't even have the mindset of identifying with a prospective vendor. I mean, even a retailer in your community. Hey, I'm a nonprofit. Do you have, a different rate, a lower rate?
Right.
Free services. And I think that that's one of those weird things that, holy moly, we've got to be rolling that out. That has to be, as I used the word mindset earlier, that has to be, something that we continuously work into our relationships.
Yeah, I mean, the squeaky wheel gets the oil, and that's not the best analogy or best colloquialism here. But right, if you don't ask, you won't get it. And so, right, Microsoft and Google both offer free to low cost, way lower cost than their enterprise licensing for the nonprofit industry specifically. And it's the same exact licensing structure, but it's for nonprofits because they know that the work that you're doing is impactful on society. And so they're there to provide that. Richey May also offers nonprofit rates because we understand that the services you offer are necessary across the board, and every dollar you spend on security IT not going towards your cause is a dollar that doesn't impact what it's supposed to. And so we all understand that. And so asking that question, what is the nonprofit rate, or is there a nonprofit discount? It sounds awkward a lot of times, but like we instantly, like our ears just and eyes brighten up when we hear that, and like, oh, you're in the nonprofit industry. Totally missed that. Let's talk about what we can do for you to drive a greater security posture without impacting the overall budget, essentially.
Right. Well, I just think it's a good habit too. I don't
Yeah.
care what it is you're trying to do. I think you've got to, you know, you've got to put that in your lexicon. You got to put that in the way you spend your money and do business, because the nonprofit sector is a huge economic engine, and we're not always trying to get better deals, right? I mean, it's a fascinating thing, and especially in cybersecurity, where I feel like a lot of us in the sector are so fearful to begin with because we don't know what we don't know.
Yep.
You know, um,
Absolutely.
you talked about something really interesting, and I want to jump into this just a little bit about risk assessment and some of these tools that are free or low cost. What does that do, and what does that look like?
Yeah, I think the best way to go here is that you don't know what to protect if you haven't actually done an assessment to understand where those risks are, right? Like without that visibility into what is truly vulnerable in your environment, how do you know where to focus your time, energy, budget, whatever it might be towards protecting, right? Do you want to play whack-a-mole when it comes to cybersecurity, or do you want to know where to focus these things? Because you may be super secure in certain areas where you keep investing time, effort, money, whatever it might be, and insecure in other areas where you haven't invested any of that. And so that risk assessment is really there to drive uh, not just an understanding, but a focus on investment. And I'm not talking just financially. I'm talking about time and
Yeah,
effort and thought. Right, thought is a huge investment into a lot of this. So
right. Yeah. Getting yourself educated up as to what you should be thinking about, the questions that you should be asking, I think is riveting. I really, really do. And I love that you kind of have helped us understand that. Let's talk about something else. And again, automation is the big thing. We're talking about AI, this concept that with a couple keystrokes, life's going to be easier. How does that relate directly to security?
yeah, I think it drives down the cost, right? Automations remove the mundane and repeatable tasks that we used to have to do on a daily basis, which people are an expense, and so having to go through that. We've seen this massive shift over the last 20 years that I've been in cybersecurity, where it used to be just put a person on it, have the person do it, to there's software that is automating this. And a lot of the times, as we talked about earlier, you already own that software, right?
Yeah,
You may not know it, but it's already there. And so, right, there
right.
are several automatable items inside of your environment from, right, and we'll say all the things that have been preached for a long time in this, against any industry, but from a cybersecurity perspective, right? Like patch your systems up, make sure everything's up to date. Those updates are always related to security and then some functionality. Um, right? Make sure that you have multi-factor authentication on in your environment, and that multi-factor authentication is just automatically there when you're doing things. You can opt in to make sure that it's required, right? There are email concepts that we could get into, that, right, making sure that your email is always secure by registering certain aspects of what we would call SPF, DKIM, DMARC. Once those things are set, you never have to touch them again, and they do certain aspects of security for your email so that you're not receiving email, you're not able to get spoofed from an email perspective, which would be somebody using your likeness or your identity to send an email out to somebody to gain information, steal money, whatever it might be. You can turn all those things off, or you can turn on automation to take those away, and then leveraging AI to some extent to make recommendations in this space. AI is smart; it's not perfect, and so having a double check there would be really helpful. But it's a great place to start.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's really smart. And I think it's also probably a good habit to get into. It kind of follows along with what you were saying about risk. Things are changing so quickly that if we can understand what some of our newer options are, um, that we're building on knowledge that we already have versus starting from less than zero, which I
Yeah,
think is what's so frightening to a lot of nonprofits.
yeah. Yeah, and nobody's starting from true zero unless you started yesterday, right? There's
Mhm.
always something there, right? There is security by design that's integrated into a lot of aspects. Just
Mhm.
making sure that you invest a little time to understand what those are, or you leverage those in your life and in your organization that are trusted to do those things and help drive those concepts forward.
Right, right. Before we let you go, I want to talk a little bit about security strategies and the relationship with donor data. We're going to spend a lot more on this concept at another point in time. But can this be something that is low cost, and should this be something that is a starting point for us?
Yeah, strategy is usually free, right? It's usually right as long as you understand what needs to happen. And so the things are basic. Let's employ the basic concepts of a security strategy. So limit
Mhm,
who has access to data. Make sure
mhm,
that as you are collecting data, that you're employing the security concepts around that, the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of that data remain protected inside of your environment. So using encryption, things along those lines. Monitor your network or your data constantly to see if there is any unauthorized activity. Right, those strategies all help protect donor data. Um, and then, the most important one, and my favorite one, is just uh, understanding what to do if something does happen, because we all, like, I hate saying it, but it's not if but when,
mhm.
or right,
Yeah.
like uh, those concepts in security, right? Like everybody is going to get breached at some time in their life. We've all received a letter in the mail because our data was stolen from a company that we didn't even know had our data to some extent.
I,
So knowing how to respond to it is the really the ultimate goal. It's a non-technical strategy, right? Putting things into place to say, if this happens, I know I need to contact A, B, and C. And that strategy alone helps you respond faster and move forward out of an incident into day-to-day work and doing what you're supposed to be doing anyway. Stop focusing on security and focus on the true mission at that point.
right. I love that you framed it up that way because that's not what I thought you were going to say. And I really appreciate this because I think it helps. And again, we're going to dive into this conversation with a more robust focus. But you're absolutely right. Thinking about the policy and the strategy of response is huge. We talk about this, with our clients, with policy change, with physical change, disasters. I mean, all sorts of things that are going on
Yeah.
that we deal with in the nonprofit sector, but we don't often think about that combining in with cybersecurity. It's very interesting.
Yep. And it should just be a bolt on to those, right? It doesn't have to be its own separate massive beast that you have to work on. It should be, we already have strategy talking about the future growth of our nonprofit, or what happens if the building burns down, or there's a tornado, or we don't have cell service. Bolt cybersecurity into that, right? It's all considered similar risk for the organization, and you already have some sort of plan there. Let's just
Mhm.
extend it a little bit there.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's really smart. I think that's really wise counsel. And I knew that when we got you back on Nonprofit Show, you'd help us with this. I always think about you and setting my hair on fire, but then you always seem to bring it back down so that I'm like, okay, we can navigate this. This isn't as scary as it is. It's more frightening if you don't do something, right? And I think that's kind of what we're trying to kind of give that foundational support here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, as I mentioned earlier, as we were getting underway, we're going to have Michael and Richey May on with us for a period of 4 different episodes. And it's really an interesting conversation. Each one is a standalone episode, but they all tag together and they're just so interdependent. And so, why cybersecurity is an issue for nonprofits. And it's, I think, one of those heartbreaking things, Michael, that a lot of people are like, we're doing the work of angels. Nobody would victimize us, but we're so easy to be taken advantage of. And so,
Yep.
huge topic. We talked about today cybersecurity on a budget. And then we're going to really drill down into protecting donor data and what that looks like. And I think we'll talk more about that strategy of preparation and understanding risk. And then last but not least, when disaster strikes, and you made that comment, it's not when, it's not if, it's when, right?
Yeah. Yep.
That we need to be thinking about this because it's going to happen at some point. And you mentioned this. I just got a letter, for the nonprofit show last week about a vendor that we use, innocuous, not a lot of money, nothing that is too important in our daily operations, but that they had a data breach and that our was captured and used or sent out, went off site, whatever word you want to use, during their breach. And so what you said just now really resonated with me because this happens.
Yeah. The third party that we use and we trust and we send data to,
Mm-hmm.
we need to make sure not just that they can access our data and do what we need to be done, but that they protect that data as well. And so that's a huge concept through this as well. Doesn't fit in the budgetary aspects of this particular talk, but it is one of those things that as you're considering vendors,
Mm-hmm.
um, that they have a plan in place to protect
Mm-hmm.
your data that you are giving them as well. It's vitally important because that could come back to bite you as the nonprofit, even though that they're the ones that experience the breach. So
Exactly. I think that's one of the big lessons here is, you can think, oh, I'm working on a small budget, and yet we're taking on more and more platforms. We're introducing more and more of this technology in the management of our nonprofits. And if we don't understand where that vulnerability could lie,
yeah,
that's a huge cost. I mean, a huge cost. And then we're the ones that have to go back to our stakeholders and donors and fess up and say this happened. So
yeah.
it's really.
And it can be the smallest thing that you
Mhm.
leverage. You send email addresses and phone numbers of a donor base to print T-shirts and right, like whatever it might be. Those small things can seem, like you said, innocuous, and yet can
Yeah.
cause a massive impact, and more so from a reputational perspective, right? That's one of the largest things that you have is reputation. So making sure that that is shiny all the time is very important.
Yeah, I appreciate you wrapped our conversation up with that because you're right. The value of reputation and donor trust is just critical. We don't spend enough time thinking about it or addressing it. But I love that you helped us to understand that because that really is a North Star. Michael Nouguier, partner at Cybersecurity Services at Richey May. You can learn more about Richey May's work in cyber at richeymay.com. You can also, if you're viewing this, um, go ahead and use that QR code, and that will take you right into the cyber groups site and really give you even more information about what it is that they do and how they do it. Michael, this is great. I mean, you kind of gave me a little bit of stress because I had to, you gave me some things to think about that I hadn't before, but, and you might have raised the alarm, but at the end of the day, I think you gave us some concrete things that will help us understand how we can navigate this, right?
That was the goal, is to not scare, but provide resources as best I can. So
Yeah, it's awesome. Well, we trust you and we trust you to help guide us. And like I said, we have four episodes just delving into cyber. And I just think this is such an important time. It's changing every day. And it's something that we need to be really thoughtful about and shift our own mindset. So, Michael, I'm looking forward to having even more conversations with you as we navigate all of this really important these important topics for our nonprofit sector. You know, it's another important topic for us are our presenting sponsors. They afford us this opportunity to have these thought leaders on and really explore some critical issues impacting our nonprofit sector. They include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Interim Executives Academy, Your Part-Time Controller, and Fundraisers Friday. You know, Michael, we say this ending line every episode, and today I'm thinking about it in a different way. And it goes like this: to stay well so you can do well. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you again.